Right now, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the home office of Dr. Sowunmi, a consultant emergency psychiatrist at the Neuropsychiatric Hospital, Aro, Abeokuta. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And thank you very much for giving us this audience. Doctor, recently I was making a research about Muhammad Zulfar Alpha. I found out that this man from Kwana Dangara in Kano is responsible for raping 40 women. And amongst these women, we have minors, we have aged ones. So I came up with this theory that this is ridiculous. This can't be normal. It must have medical implication attached to it. And there was this troubling statistics that came from the Inspector General of Police of Nigeria that within 5 months we've had reported cases of rape at an alarming rate of 717 cases. Those are the reported, and we still have some underlying unreported cases. So I want to put this question forward to you, sir, as a psychiatrist, doctor, that what can you say is the psyche of a rapist, sir?
Thank you very much for the question. I want to first give an underlying statement, underlying discussion before I answer your question about the psyche of a rapist. I think the first thing is for people to generally know that raping or rape is a psychiatric disorder or a mental health disorder, which is generally known as sexual abuse, and this can come in different forms. What do we mean by it can come in different forms? First, it can be forced sexual abuse, which is what we all generally know, and rape, which is more common. The others, infliction of pain, okay, and then those who have their genitals inserted with objects, and so we can have those forms of rapes. In addition, I also want to let people know that they need to understand what a mental health issue is. So mental health issue in very simple terms and very understandable terms has to do with 3 rubrics of our daily activities. The first is the way we think, the way we feel, and then the way we behave. Now, the way we feel, behave, and then think are interconnected. But usually in mental health disorder, one of the 3 is the major problem, and then it influences the other. So, for example, the way one thinks can affect the way we feel, and then ultimately affect the way we behave. Then the way we feel affects the way we think, and then also the way we behave. And our behaviors can also affect the way we feel, and then the way we think. So generally, mental health disorders have problems with these 3 sections, which then interwoven and then form a psychiatric disorder. So having said that, it's important to also let people know that in terms of the demography of people affected and both the victim and then the perpetrators, that generally in terms of being victims, age range has been associated between 16 and 24, 25. But generally it can occur within any age range. So you can have people less than 16, so 15 downwards can be raped, and those older than 25, 26. So you can have as old as 80s, 90s being raped. So generally both sex can be raped, so both can be victims, both can be perpetrators. So it's important for us to know that these people are affected. In terms of the psyche of a rapist, it's important to know that in terms of the cause or the etiology of any mental health disorder, there are 3 different rubrics in which we can look at the cause, because not a single particular factor contributes to someone developing a mental health disorder. So we generally have 3 factors that we think about: the physical factor, the psychological factor, and then the social factor. All these 3 factors combine together in different rates and at different times to determine whether a particular person will develop a mental health disorder, and in this case, whether the person will rape or not. Now, it's important to also know that some people are not essentially, in some terms, coded as what you would call a mental health disorder. So, and what do I mean by that? Some people are said to have minor psychiatric or mental health disorder, and others have a major psychiatric disorder. Now, this rubric is just for convenience. A mental health disorder is a mental health disorder. But what the classification
and both the minor and the major needs mental attention.
Both need mental attention, but the classification is just to let people understand what the severity of the illness is. So, for example, what is the psychic of a rapist? So, when you want to talk about the psychic of a rapist, the word psyche is a common term to look at the psychological factor that contributes to someone developing developing a mental illness. So, in the context of what we are talking about, which is a rapist, now, when you talk about the psychological or the psychic, there are two major subdivisions under the psychological well-being or the psychological makeup of a person. Now, the first is the personality traits, which people talk about. There are different definitions and different explanation to all these things. But generally, since that's not the main topic, I'll just generally explain that there's nobody that has a particular dimension, but everybody has different traits of different groups of psychological makeup, and that makes the individual. So no two people are the same. Two different people have two different psychological makeup or psychological traits, and then the motivation of the individual. So in life, the most common one is Maslow's hierarchy of motivation, where they have different categories of people's motivation, which will start from food, shelter, which are basic psychological things, to self-actualization. Now, these two things determine what the psyche of a rapist will be. So what are the psychological traits that you're likely to find in someone who's a rapist? Now, it's important for us to know that it's not specific. It's not a one-shoe-fits-all. That's because I explained that the physical, psychological, and then social factors all contribute and all color each other to determine what the person will become. So, for example, you could have somebody who has psychopathic traits, you understand, but he will not rape. That's because some physical and then psychological factors have colored those and made the person not to be more prone to raping. So, in very simple terms, what has been associated with people who rape have different categories and different range, but what we call the cluster B generally have been more associated with people who have rape. Not to talk too much in very big grammar, what we're just saying is that we have people who have who have difficulties relating with people, who have difficulties also associating with people and relating adequately.
The ones we call social lepers.
Well, I don't know what people will call social leper, but in terms of my own training, we're talking about people who have difficulties with social interaction, because social interaction is a different class entirely and depends on the society and the person in which the person is living. So, for example, if somebody grows up within a very sociable environment, or parents who are sociable, the person will have traits which will make the person more sociable. Yeah. If the person they have not grown or had parents who are not sociable and have not been in an environment which is sociable, it's not likely to be considered a very sociable person in the context of people who are sociable. So that's why I said that the social environment in this term will contribute to the person. But be it as it may, the most important thing we need to know in terms of the psychic of the individual with who rapes is that what are the personality traits in this person and what are the motivation that this person has. So sex is physiological drive. So if you have somebody who...
I'm so happy you picked the topic right on sex, which I would want to chip in a question so that you help us buttress more on that sex. The professional angle you've given this has thrown more light and insight to this topic. Now, when we talk about sex traits, I came up with a lot of terms where some people talk about sadomasochism. They enjoy violence. Some people there's this domineering act they put up with sex right now. There is a lot of psyche around sex. Some people derive pleasure in inflicting pain and all these things. So I want you to help us, please, shed more light in that as a predisposing factor also to consider from a potential rapist.
Okay, just like I said initially, that sexual abuse is not just the first sexual activities, which is the most common one. So you have those who inflict pain. Now, those who inflict pain come into different forms. Those who want pain inflicted on them, and those who inflict pain on people. And that's the way they enjoy their sexual activities. Under the mental health rubric, they have a psychological disorder, and we look at them as psychological dysfunction. Essentially, we are not trying to tag people, but generally, it's important to know that when somebody has issues or has traits or does things and they affect his ability to cohabit or to function in normal society, then we're talking about the person having a psychological dysfunction or a psychological disorder. So you have people with sexual disorders, and that includes the masochism that you've talked about. There are quite a number of them. So it's important to know that even under this rubric or this disorder, the normal factors I've talked about determine how they manifest. Okay, or their predisposition. So you have pedophiles who will have sexual activities with the minors or children, people within the child and then the adolescent age. So you have the masochism, those who inflict pains on others. You have other ones. I don't want to bug you with the names, but essentially what some of them do in this particular time in terms of pain is that they inflict pain on other people. So another common one are those who use objects within the genitals or insert objects into the genitals. So and generally there are one or other forms of sexual dysfunction which happens.
Okay, so doctor, thank you very much. We've taken time to talk about from the angle of the rapist. Right now, I want us to look from the direction of the victim. Now, considering the victim right now, what are the psychological effects the act can have on the victim? And I want us to consider both genders.
Okay, essentially, it's virtually the same for both genders. So it's not like there are some features that you see manifest in a particular gender and not in the other. But what differs is just which one manifests. So I think the most important or the most common one is the shame. And that's the reason why it's underreported. Our environment does not allow or it's not comfortable enough to allow people to discuss this kind in the open and discuss it. And this is because they are usually stigmatized. Now, both genders will be stigmatized. So, for example, the victim is asked, maybe you are the cause, is the way you dress, the way you talk, okay, or why were you the one?
But you don't believe dressing is an excuse that prompts rape.
Some people talk about improper dressing as being a cause of rape, but that is in a context. Okay, for example, dressing is culture based. Okay, so it's a cultural activity. So, for example, if you have a society which is being indoctrinated by the Western side, you're likely to have cultural dressing, or you're likely to have dressing which might differ from what was represented in the society or the social environment initially. And most often than not, some of these dressing over time have been accepted, but not accepted by all, because some people have acculturized to a new cultural setting, while others haven't. So you're likely to have people who are proponents of the old culture of that environment, likely to talk more about improper dressing in terms of the new acculturization in terms of the youth. So, for example, we also know that fashion changes with generation. So, and usually it's a circle. Some fashions will be acceptable at a time, at other times they will not be acceptable, and we generally just circle our fashion sense over time. So what was accepted in the 50s might not be accepted in the 80s, and then in the 2000s, the 2000s, they might not be acceptable. Okay. So generally that is that. But in terms of the features which you asked, it's important to know that they can manifest with any psychiatric symptoms. So from anxiety, aside from the shame, the anxiety, they can have psychotic symptoms, which will range from problems with the way they think, they feel, and then they behave. And in very simple terms, it's important for you to know that people can manifest in those three rubrics. So people can have thought problems, which will affect the way they think. Okay, they can make themselves victims and not forgive themselves. So they might think what we will say in a negative context about themselves. So their thinking process might be affected. They might manifest feelings which will range from anxiety, irritability, depression, elation, and all sorts. They might be appropriate. Some might be appropriate, which is more common for others in terms of the trauma which had just happened, and some might be inappropriate. So you could have somebody who was raped and then becomes elated, changes behavior, accepts some form of sexual activities which you would not expect from the individual before the traumatic event. So that will range along that line. So you could also have behavioral changes in this person. The person might not be more as sociable as he used to be. The person's interaction with people might be affected. His interaction in terms of behavior with the family, the environment, the workplace, and then religious settings.
Okay. All right, so doctor, taking it from that aspect right now, I would proceed to the final question, and I want you to please answer this question from two perspectives.
Okay.
From the perspective of the culprit or the perpetrator, a rapist as the case may be, and also from the angle of the victim. What are the medical advices you can give to actually curb one's excesses towards becoming towards the tendency of becoming a rapist, and also how can one overcome all this traumatic? I think the medical term is post-traumatic stress PTSD disorder. What are the medical advices for the victim to overcome the effects of rape?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing, let me start from the rapist. It's important for us to know that a rapist is ill, okay? And in both aspects, whether the rapist or the victim, both need evaluation. Now, there's what we call in psychiatric terms or mental terms, insight. What does insight mean? Insight means, in simple terms, that does the person know he's ill? Does the person agree with the features of the illness? Does the person agree that the features of the illness culminate into that illness? And is the person agreeing that he has that illness? Is the person also agreeing to take medications for that illness? So it's important to know that most people with mental disorders don't have insight. And the simple way to explain that is it's the brain that lets you know that your legs are paining you if you have an injury. Now, when the brain is sick itself, there's nobody to tell the brain that he's sick. So the person, although will be able to do the normal functioning, which is think, feel, and behave, okay? You'll be able to run those programs, but who is running that program in that context is a sick brain, okay? So the person does not see what he's doing as being wrong because the brain is not functioning properly. So for my advice is to the society, because the person does not know that what he's doing is actually wrong, okay? The person needs a psychiatric or mental health evaluation. But not all people who commit rape are sick.
Okay, good, because I was about to ask you that.
Some people who commit rape are sick. Now, those who commit crime in that sense, in the context of them not being sick, we have to face the criminal justice system. And I believe the constitution of the country is adequate enough to capture and then treat appropriately. So most often than not, rape is a crime. So the criminal justice system will take its course, and those who have mental health issues will be treated appropriately. So that would be my own advice on it. The society has its role to play, and the society is important in terms of the fact that, like I said, the factors are physical, psychological, and then social factors. It's important to know that some people have genetic predisposition to do these things. And because they have those genetic predisposition does not mean they will do it, but it just means they have higher risk factors than others. And it's important that this be looked in this context, and then they'll be monitored and then treated appropriately. So the other aspect is then the psychological rubric, which has to do with the psychological traits, the personality traits, and the motivation of that person. So a person who has, who is still, if you follow the Maslow hierarchy, is still in the psychological phase, which has to do with food, shelter, sex, and all these things, which are written in the physiological position. It's important that if the person's drive is more physiological, then he's more likely to commit rape if he is not able to meet up with the societal demands for him to have a partner. So because of that, there are some psychological contributions that will be needed, and it's important for us to also know that, and we need to look at that. Then there are some social factors that needs to be done. So what's the social position or the cultural position? What's the political position on these aspects? What are the environmental issues that need to be worked on? So some people have been abused and come from abusive home. They are more likely, to abuse others. Those who are abused are more likely to be abused. So we need to look at these factors and then look at them appropriately. Be that as it may, there are other things that could be done for them. But what is most important is that anybody who rapes needs a psychological evaluation, and then the necessary steps should be taken for. So if they can then be categorized to those who have mental illness and then rape, and those who don't have and then rape. And then the criminal justice system can be informed appropriately.
So what about from the part of the victim?
For the part of the victim, I think one of the first and major thing that is important is psychotherapy, which is talk therapy. It's important for these people to ventilate. Most of the major problem that we have within the society is that they are being stigmatized and they are being condemned. This person has just gone through a major trauma, and the person needs to ventilate. That is when you know the way the person is thinking about it, the way he's feeling, and the most likely behavior that the person will put up after the trauma, which is the rape. So it's important that the society allow the victims, to ventilate and not to judge them. The issue of judgment should be left for the judge or the criminal justice system, and not the society. What the society needs is supportive therapy, support the person, allow the person to ventilate, let the person have hope, let the person have care and support. That's the most important thing. And as soon as possible, the person should also be referred to the mental health facility for help. There's nobody that will have gone through help and who have gone through rape who will not need a psychological or psychiatric evaluation. Now, because the society stigmatizes psychiatry and mental health issues, you think of as a person gone mad. No, that is not what we are saying. All we are saying is that the person needs help so that the person does not develop a major psychiatric disorder or a major psychiatric problem, does not have a major psychiatric problem. And that way, that can be sorted out as appropriate.
Okay.
So if the person actually needs drug, it's during the psychological and the psychiatric or the mental health evaluation that it will be indicated.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time. If you just listen to Dr. Sowunmi, this program, you would agree with me that a lot of people are out there that need medical attention and they are unattended to. Some don't know, some are either at the minor stage or the chronic stage. But to sum it up, rape can also be linked to psychological issues, psychiatric issues that these potential rapists, they need psychiatric attention, and most of the victims, definitely almost all or all need psychiatric attention. I want to once again thank you, Dr. Sowunmi, for your time. We really appreciate your kind gesture for taking this time out to host us, entertain us at your private library. And I must say, this is a very wonderful library collection. And it also tells us from the way you talk. So we've learned a lot. I personally have learned a lot. And I'm saying thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The pleasure has been mine.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Yes, sir.